Welcome to the latest episode of E&T Critical Targets podcast, in which we look at the ways that engineering, science and technology sectors can help create a better future for everyone. My special guest today is Fran Scott. Fran is perhaps best known for providing fiery demonstrations for Dick and Dom's BBC show, which has also been the engineering judge on Channel 4's Lego Masters and appeared as an expert in abandoned engineering. Fran is also a pyrotechnician, a former science content producer at the Royal Institution. She also runs her own engineering outreach company, Great Scott Productions. She's a neuroscientist by education, but an engineer at heart. And Fran uses her knowledge to entertain and excite audience on stage and screen, using high-impact demonstrations to prove her scientific point. Welcome to you again, Fran.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
So I spoke to Fran back in 2021 when we launched our critical targets, and she was then, as she is today, our champion for the inspiration category. So Fran, taking that in a very broad level, I think since we last spoke that the world seems to have shifted backwards in terms of positivity and just the health of society. It's been a tough few years and maybe a bit short on positive role models in society. We could do with a bit more inspiration, couldn't we?
Tim, yeah, it's not the happiest times, I would say, looking globally and in the UK. But also, I suppose, on a positive note, there has been a lot of development post-COVID. 2021, we were just coming out of that region of our lives. And so a lot has changed for positive. And then, yes, obviously things are at a certain level in this country at the moment. There is so much going on politically, economically, educationally, that, yes, it's not an easy time for a lot of people.
No, indeed. So, but if we look specifically at the engineering, technology, science disciplines, they're viewed as absolutely critical when it comes to solving many of the world's problems, as you mentioned it did with COVID. Other podcasts in this series look at other things such as sustainability, alternative energy, providing enough food and water, etc. And there is evidence that the younger generation buy into the importance of these things, but still, and this is a very UK-centric observation, still not enough are inspired to seek out careers in these disciplines, for example, by doing STEM courses at university. What is it that's missing that stops young people from entering the world of STEM?
And isn't that the billion-dollar question, Tim? But also, I suppose, in very quick summary, when it comes to STEM, obviously that is a very broad brushstroke, but there is something called science capital, and I've very much over the last few years started to use something called engineering capital, which is basically, is this for someone like me? And so it's that type of attitude that we're looking at developing, both with science and engineering, maths, technology, all of those. It's finding out ways that as a society, we can help those that would be so perfect within these sectors to allow them to see that this is right for them.
So that's interesting. I haven't come across engineering capital. Because what we're missing here really is the inspiration, isn't it, for people to go into these disciplines. So I would ask you, where does the inspiration come from? Do we need more exposure for engineering, a more prominent place in the school curriculum? Maybe it's about more status or rewards, but surely at the core is that young people need to be inspired to go into STEM. So where is that inspiration coming from? And is engineering capital part of that answer?
Yes, engineering capital, I would say, is not necessarily just the inspiration. Engineering capital is that feeling that one gets that if you go into that, you will find your tribe. And of course, before that feeling can start, you need inspiration. But inspiration comes from so many different angles of our lives, and at so many different ages as well. It can come from the media, and there's loads of different types of media. It can come from family. So I go into schools day in, day out, and I often see that those that know about engineering have a family member that has done engineering, and it's that sort of opportunity of seeing what it involves and opening people's eyes to it. But in a way, it's also quite a naive view to, I suppose, see it as like, oh, if people knew about engineering, of course they'd love it. It's just a case of getting them to see what it's about. And that as well is not just the case. It's about this inspiration on a bigger scale of letting people know that they can choose their career, that there are different options out there, and this inspiration of sustained employment in terms of, will this route give me what I need, what I want? Will it give me the money? Will it give me the opportunity to have the adult lifestyle that I need, the freedom that I need, the friendships that I need? And will I feel supported? And so this inspiration, oh gosh, it can come from so many different angles. Yeah, media, family, generally in society, and yourself. There's inspiration is so hard, as we have tried. It is so hard to quantify and evaluate, because it's that untangible thing that makes you go, oh, do you know what? I might look into that. And that is quite hard to define, even with ourselves. Sometimes we define our inspiration as a teacher or a family member. And do we know that that's the case? Maybe that family member gave us that little push, or that teacher was like, oh, do you know what? Actually, maybe I could do that. But maybe it was an amalgamation of things. And that's kind of what it is. What gave you the confidence to have that conversation with your teacher? What gave you the confidence to do that work experience? And so inspiration, as with anything in life, is not black and white. There's not one size fits all. There's not this magic wand that we can wave and inspire people to do this thing that we don't desperately want them to do, and as a society need people to do. So yes, it comes from lots and lots of different angles.
So, do you think maybe then that it is inherent in some people, and it just, rather than being fully inspired, like you say, by a teacher or something like that, there is an inherent engineer inside all of us, and it just needs somebody to light that litmus paper, as it were?
Yes and no, I would say. In terms of, everybody is a unique individual. There are people that might be very, very good at engineering, but hate the idea of it. And that is okay. We need people to do all kinds of different careers. And we go into schools and we do career guidance. And we say, we're not here to make you all become engineers. We're not here to make you all become engineers. We're here to let you know the opportunities that are available to you if you do, and let you know that it exists. But it isn't right for everybody. There are some people that just don't love the things that we love. They're not fascinated by bricks and bridges and coding, and that's okay. But what is not okay is those people that aren't given the chance to see that these things exist and go, do you know what? Maybe that is for me. And we talk about, I suppose, inherent behaviors. Society has got a lot to answer for, and things are changing. When it comes to pigeonholing, society has got a lot to answer for, but things are changing. When it comes to, I suppose, pigeonholing individuals, I don't think I know nobody is born a masterful engineer. Nobody is born hating engineering. But slowly over time, things are fed into our psyche, deliberately or not deliberately, that can sway what we love, what we're good at, what we often take part in. And obviously, the things that we take part in more, we become better at it. And so we become more confident in it. And so there's a lot of things that fit into, by the age of 4, we feel more comfortable doing one thing than the other thing. It doesn't mean that we had that innate our drive to do it or that innate skill when we were born.
Well, maybe looking at that, thinking about those very early, that very early education, awareness of everything that's going on. No, I think I might be out of touch in this respect. My children have grown up, but my feeling is that all the great stuff that you used to do with CBBC and the other channels to create interest in technology is not as high profile as it once was. And the adult documentary channels remain obsessed with Nazis and sharks. So is engineering and science suffering from a lack of profile, particularly in those early ages?
I think that's a very interesting question. And I like your turn of phrase there, where it's lack of profile. I don't know if you're aware or the listeners will be aware about the crisis going on in what we would term old media. In terms of television, there's a funding crisis, and engineering shows, science shows, they are expensive to make. And so to make them on what we would term our normal TV, there's just not the money to do that. And so, yes, when you or I turn on ITV, BBC, the science shows that were once there aren't. But it doesn't mean there's not this new avenue of media that the younger generations are watching. Speak to any 13-year-old, and they don't watch television as we know it. They will watch YouTube, they will watch television on demand. They are choosing what to watch. And there is some ridiculously high profile engineering shows out there. Some of the YouTubers are doing brilliant stuff. The other week, there's Maker Central, which is a gathering of all makers, so engineering focused YouTubers, and it is wildly popular. And so I think it is there, but what is, I think, interesting about this is one, there's been such a shift in media that if you don't get your media via that avenue, you just don't know it exists. And so you can think there's this dearth and it's just not there. But it is. But also, if you are of that age, you have to seek it out. And this is where it becomes quite vital. It's that people that have that spark, that interest, that are like, oh, do you know what? I want to watch how you convert a bicycle into a jet powered bicycle. That is there. That is on YouTube. You can find that out. But you have to want to seek it out in the first place. And this is where it becomes vital in that we are having that conversation very early on. You know, there's been research done that by the time children get to early primary school, that they are very much thinking of things as not for them, or that they don't think they could do. There's very much boy jobs and girl jobs, even by the time children are going to primary school. And that's the thing that can be limiting, because if they have that channel view by that age, then they're never going to seek those things out that might be the things that they actually really love. It's just they're thinking, oh, people like me don't watch shows like that. I should watch shows like this. They're the shows for me. So I think it's there. I think it is high profile. I just think there is becoming a generational divide in the way that we consume media. And so the generations perhaps aren't talking to each other enough to be able to know what the other one is consuming.
Well, and does it become difficult? Because I come from that generation, as you say, of having, even three main channels, let alone four, and as was afterwards. And we would look to people in your sort of role to get that message across, to inspire people and educate them as to what was available. And like you say, when we're moving to YouTube, it's a different argument then, isn't it? There's different points of contact, and most people might not be aware of them. So, how do we bridge that gap?
You're absolutely right. The onus is put on the viewer which is good and bad. You know, if you're into anything, you can find that on YouTube. You can find that on social media. But what it's doing is it's increasing these echo chambers, and echo chambers are horrendous for all manner of reasons. And in a way, engineering, especially software, is working against itself, because as soon as you start to look into that one thing that you're into, you just continually get shown it, and you get surrounded by people that are into that. Now, if that ends up being engineering, amazing for the engineering sector, you get shown all the wonderful things. But yes, you've got to sort of seek it out in the first place. So how do we change it? And this, I think, is critical. And I think it's where schools come into it, because when it comes to school time, that is the time of where you have that contact time with young people, of where you can say your phones are down, you are not in control as a viewer. I can broaden your mind, and let you look at things that perhaps you don't think are for you. And unfortunately, our teachers are so overworked at the moment. There's so much they have to deliver on schools, but um, it's so difficult to have the time to do that, especially with the curriculum the way it is. And I know you earlier suggested, should engineering be more prominent in the curriculum, and it becomes so difficult in that eh, eh, just putting the content in doesn't necessarily mean that you get inspiration out. And so, yes, things need to be looked at, but I think they need to be looked at strategically. And this is where I think that the engineering sector can really help. And this is what we do with our business. It's in terms of looking at things as a whole, looking at it holistically, because teachers teachers have too much to do. We can't give them a new lesson plan. We can't give them extra stuff to do. That it just won't work. You can't get a machine that's already working at 20% over max power to do more. You can't get it to do that. We all know that. And so it's like, what can we do with the situation as it is to help them, help the situation, and help the young people to see these things? Now, we've been involved with many outreach programs, and one thing that I am seeing change is strategic thinking. And this is wonderful. It used to be 15 years ago, you would rock up to a science fair with a balloon and a kebab stick, and you'd call that outreach. That is not outreach. That is not inspiration. But it's still numbers ticked, if you know what I mean. So if that's what you're going for, fair. But what we're now seeing is this shift in what is it that we're trying to achieve with our outreach? What attitudes are we trying to change? How can we measure that with evaluation? How can we assure that our evaluation is conducted in a robust way? What's the best method to deliver that? How can we work with our, in inverted commas, competitors to make sure that we're not cross fighting for the same pupils, and making sure that one region's getting lots and another region's not getting much? Because one thing that I am finding is these engineering firms working together, because they all know that an increased talent pool will be favorable no matter what company you are in the sector. And so it's this overall sector thinking of, right, what do we want to achieve? How do we do this? How do we have sustained engagement? And how do we measure the outcome and see if we're going along the right lines? Which sounds obvious, right? This is what you do with any engineering project, except it's taken this time to actually take inspiration and engagement seriously, because I think for the past few years it's seen as, yeah, if I just rock up and if they meet me, if they see me, of course they'll be inspired. And sometimes it actually has, the research shows us that sometimes it can go the other way, if it's not delivered in a thought through manner. And so what I am loving seeing is this development of this cohesion of the companies, this realization of what we can try to do with the resources that we've got. How can we work together? How can we divide the country up in a way that engineering firms near, I don't know, Nottingham or near Derby can cover that region, whereas engineering firms based in Manchester can cover that region, and deliver this thought through, well delivered, robustly evaluated program that we can see works and we can see make a difference. And that's the change that I'm seeing, and that's how you get change. But it's taken a few years for the sector to get there.
Well, it is levelling up on a STEM level, I guess. But what you've just been saying there ties into our critical target that we set back in 2021. And what we said back then was by 2025, all technology companies commit at least 1% of turnover and or employee time to supporting STEM education. Now, for all that was a fairly short deadline, and perhaps in respect too short, even taking COVID, Brexit, global conflicts into account. And it takes time to set up necessary schemes and processes to make it happen. But my feeling is that this has not really moved forward at all. But from what you're saying, perhaps particularly the bigger companies are making a lot more effort down this road. But where do you think we are with it at the moment? And is it being embraced by the whole industry, or is it just maybe those few engineering giant companies that are propping it up for everybody else?
That is an interesting question, and of course, I can only answer anecdotally of the companies that we work with, that do tend to be the bigger firms. And not all the bigger firms are doing a great job, may I add. The ones we're working with are doing fantastic, but yeah, there are still those that, how do I describe it? Think that contact time, numbers on, bums on seats equals inspiration. And that's not the truth. But there are those that take the evaluation seriously. And so in terms of money, I don't think obviously money helps. Anything is possible as long as you have enough time and enough money. But if you have a lot of money and enough time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you do what's needed. And so with the target, with it being that percentage, with the target being money spent, surely then we just know that they've spent that money. We don't know that the change that we want to happen has occurred. And so surely we should be encouraging the thing that we want to measure and that positive outcome. So should it be a look at the gender balance of those applying for apprenticeships? Should it be the societal balance of those applying for apprenticeships? Those types of things we could perhaps look at in terms of inspiration, because I know very rich firms that are doing appalling outreach. I will mention no names because I'm a professional, but I also know very small firms that are doing incredibly good outreach. And so money does not equate to quality. Money does not equate to quality, but things are getting better, but it's not everyone that's listening or knows that they have to listen. People can be bobbing along thinking they're doing a great job of engagement because they've engaged, I don't know, with 50 schools that year. Brilliant, perfect. We've ticked that box. We've gone to that many schools. But what was the percentage free school meals of that school? Was it a disadvantaged school? What were the attitude changes of those that you came across? And if you're not measuring any of that, then why are you going into the skills? What are you trying to achieve? Are you just trying to achieve contact time? Well, research has shown that it's not just contact time that leads to inspiration. And sometimes, yes, it can go the other way if that contact isn't done in the inverted commas right way. And so, the 1% spending on outreach, I think it perhaps is a bit of a stick-based encouragement rather than a carrot-based encouragement. And we all know that carrot-based encouragement works a little better for everybody.
So do you think with the benefit of hindsight, we could have chosen our critical target a little bit better? Or should we stick to where we are and refocus on this one, perhaps with a longer deadline?
hindsight is a beautiful thing, as we all know. I don't think it's an horrendous target because it gets people to think about it. But I suppose it's saying, uh, this isn't the goal, this is the driver. So, yes, maybe stick with the money based goal, but add into that, how are you evaluating? What are you trying to achieve? How do you know you've achieved it? Um, because yeah, with the extra money, more things are possible. So trying to get the firms to spend money on things like this means that you can do that robust outreach, means that you can go to the schools that don't have the access, means that you can train your staff to deliver in a way that achieves what you want to achieve. So yeah, encouraging firms to spend money in this department is never a bad thing, but the money spent should not be the only parameter that we look at.
And maybe as a final point, then the industry does have to accept that it needs to play an important part in inspiring that next generation, doesn't it? The inspiration has got to come from industry itself, really.
And absolutely, but it's not saying that it's an easy win, and it's changed. Engineering, as we all know, has massively changed within my lifetime, and I'm just 42, and so you don't have those big. I'm going to call them engineering towns. They were engineering communities. You were born, you were going to be in it. It was like, yeah, of course you'll go into that. Of course you'll do that. And it has changed so massively. And also the way we consume media has changed massively. And so as a sector, we need to kind of figure out, how do we grab young people's attention in this world where companies are spending so much money on trying to grab young people's attention. And I think there are some very, very good campaigns out there that have looked at engineering, as in, if engineering was a product, how would we market it? And they've got in marketing professionals and they've done that. And the change is palatable and it's noticeable and it's happening. But yes, it is up to the sector, unfortunately, and it's hard because engineers are good at engineering. They're not good at publicizing because they're not publicists. And so that's where I suppose people like me and what my company do come into this. But I suppose it's, let's all work together and figure out and utilize that, because yes, engineers will be great at their job, but they might not be great at telling people how great their job is, and thinking about how to educate people about how to get into that and inspiring people. That said, this visibility of engineering and the increased visibility of engineering, I think, has been incredible over the past 10 years. So just the other month, I went into an all-girls school, it happened to be, and they were like, "Oh, is this another engineering campaign?" And I was like, brilliant. Like, what a response to get. Even though, yes, it was a bit like, oh, it's another one. But it's like, wow, we're getting to these schools. It's getting out there. You know, if you're eye rolling because you're being exposed to too much engineering, they did end up liking the workshop, may I add. But it means that it is getting out there. It's not something that they'll be like, oh, I never knew about engineering. It's on their agenda, and it's getting to them, it's reaching them. And I think that is fantastic. But yes, it will rely on the sector because the sector is going to need that workforce. But the sector needs help to achieve this, because it's not it's not necessarily where the sector skill set lies. And so, yes, it's their problem, I suppose, because they're going to need that next generation coming up. And should it be put on them? It should, because of the money, but also, yeah, they're going to have to reach out, employ the right people, think outside of the box when it comes to, in terms of evaluating, not do the same thing that they've done for the past 15, 20 years. And that does take a cultural shift in thinking. And yeah, that is up to the engineering companies and sectors, because if they don't do that, then they're not going to have the skill sets that they need in those up and coming generations.
Okay, well, it's going to be fascinating to see how it evolves over the coming years. And hopefully our critical target could play a small part in that. We shall see. But thank you very much, Fran. It's been brilliant talking to you again. This is one of 7 episodes in our Critical Target series. You can now listen to all episodes by searching for the E&T Critical Targets wherever you get your podcasts, or by visiting the podcast section on the E&T website.